When I was a teenager, I asked my father if I could go get a surgery for it, and he said no. Just said no. Good morning, friends. Today, I want to talk to you guys about my opinion on how one can best manage and deal with having gynecomastia as a man. But before I do, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, like the video, and comment on the video for the sake of the algorithm. Now let's get started. What's gynecomastia? Gynecomastia is the unusual growth of breast tissue in a man. There's two kinds of tissue that grow. One is called glandular tissue, and one is fat around the tissue. Some people have more fat, some people have more glandular tissue. There's a ratio of both. The glandular tissue is somehow among people considered a little bit more permanent than the fat tissue, as if somebody loses a lot of fat, and then, for example, while they're losing fat, have low estrogen levels, they will redistribute their fat around their body. So for example, if somebody took an aromatase inhibitor and then lost fat, a lot of that fat in the breast tissue would go away. But the glandular tissue doesn't really go away, but it does do something. And I think this thing has been confusing a lot of people. So what it is this: if you block estrogen receptors in the glandular tissue very strongly, completely block them, the glandular tissue will retract in size. Any tissue that's growing in the body tends to have some kind of swelling in it, including extra water in the area as well as inflammation, whereas something that is atrophying tends to be small. You can think of a steroid user's testicles, for example, being small. They're losing cells there, the cells are dying slowly and so on. Will they ever lose their testicles completely by staying on steroids? No, the testicles will get smaller and smaller and smaller, but they won't disappear. In the exact same way, once you grow glandular tissue, it will not disappear. Now, somebody can avoid growing that tissue in their teenage years if once it began growing, they immediately went on, for example, what's called a selective estrogen receptor modulator, like raloxifene or tamoxifen. If they use that, once the sensitivity, when this happens, by the way, when the glandular tissue grows, it is sensitive. It's slightly itchy. You can feel it if you press on the nipple. It feels unusual. Your shirt may be even a little sensitive on your nipples. If a teenager, under the care of a doctor, immediately went on a SERM, a selective estrogen receptor modulator like raloxifene or tamoxifen, when this happened, they could inhibit the growth further of the gland. But however many days it was itching, it grew for. And however many days you didn't notice it. But once the gland grows to any kind of considerable size, if you then used raloxifene at the max dose, 60 milligrams, or tamoxifen at 20 milligrams, every day for the next 10 years, you will never lose that tissue. You might lose cells. Cells will die there when there's no signaling, but the attrition will not be complete. There will still be, just like a steroid user has balls, even though they use steroids for 20 years, there's a small amount of, small balls, they still exist. And just in that way, the gland will remain there and remain a bit smaller. So for example, if you have a small amount of glandular development and you're an actual professional bodybuilder and you want your gland to show less on stage, if you use a selective estrogen receptor modulator, for a couple of months, it'll be atrophied when you go on stage, but it won't completely disappear. And by the way, let me point out something. A selective estrogen receptor modulator is much more potent at doing this than an aromatase inhibitor. An aromatase inhibitor inhibits the conversion of testosterone to estrogen. In men, an aromatase inhibitor can completely crush their estrogen levels if they want to. But only in that case, when it's completely crushed, is there no signaling at the glandular tissue. Because remember, those drugs don't modulate the glandular tissue or the estrogen receptor. On the other hand, SERMs, the selective estrogen receptor modulators, modulate the estrogen receptors, differentially depending on the tissue in the body. But raloxifene and tamoxifen both almost completely inhibit estrogen signaling at the estrogen receptor in the breast tissue, while not altering your systemic levels of estrogen. The problem with the SERMs is that they're almost all associated with ocular damage over time. And they really do cause ocular damage. Some people have been on them for a year and a half, and they begin to notice eye floaters in their eyes because there's modulation of all of the estrogen receptors in your body to some degree. However, they're the natural treatment to completely inhibit. So for example, say you were a bodybuilder that's using steroids and you started feeling an itchy nipple. Would your first choice be to use an aromatase inhibitor to lower your total estrogen levels? No, unless you were going to crash them. The first thing you would do is take tamoxifen or raloxifene for that day and for a couple of other days, while you use an aromatase inhibitor to slowly lower your estrogen levels to some level that you want without crashing it completely. You can lower it slowly because you have that SERM totally inhibiting signaling at the breast tissue, so you're not accumulating more damage. Anyway, I hope this was a little bit explanatory, but the point is this. The SERM nor the AI can completely get rid of, they can't cause complete attrition of the cells that grew in the breast tissue. I know this from personal experience. I developed gynecomastia naturally, without steroids. Not severe gynecomastia like some people suffer from, but like puffy nipples. There was gynecomastia there. It bothered me a lot for 10 years or so. It bothered me a lot. When I was a teenager, I asked my father if I could go get a surgery for it, and he said no. Just said no, just no. So I had no option. I didn't have my own money, so I had to wait until I had money to do it myself later. Unfortunately, these surgeries cost quite a bit. I paid around $10,000 for my surgery. But once I did my surgery, it was so freeing. I was so happy I did it. Never had to worry about wearing t-shirts and the t-shirt like bumping up a bit on the nipple, which I found very weird and, you know, feminine. You start thinking this is a feminine. It's not breasts, but it's very weird to have this on a man, you know what I mean? It can affect your identity and so on. So this is the reason why I regret personally not doing the surgery earlier. And to be honest with you, if I knew, I would have taken a SERM when I was 13 when it first happened. But I didn't know about that stuff back then. I learned when I was 16 or so. It was already too late. But that's what I would have probably done. I would have gone the surgery earlier. So people that are considering this, especially people that want to use steroids, if you want to use steroids and already have gynecomastia, you're going to have to control estrogen so much or use a SERM that you're going to damage your health in the long term more than if you did a surgery. If you did the surgery, you will damage your health less in the long term. Trust me. You'll not have to use so many AIs. You could have your estrogen at 40 or 60, whereas if you had a little bit of gynecomastia, even having your estrogen at 60 will start to grow the gynecomastia more. Or you could use a SERM, in which case you give up your eyesight in the long term. Now, I got my surgery in Orange County, which is actually where I live now, although I used to live in Los Angeles, and I traveled to Orange County for Dr. Cruz. I originally considered a guy called Dr. Blau because of Dave Palumbo. I didn't know Dave Palumbo back then was what he is now. I never realized how unethical he was. I thought he was really recommending Dr. Blau, and Dr. Blau was excellent. I was surprised to know that Dr. Blau is like over the age of 70, may have shaky hands, and I heard from other bodybuilders that he butchered a lot of people. At the time, I still trusted Palumbo, but that's not why I didn't go. But I just didn't go to him. And I searched, and what I did was I found the guy who's most specialized in gynecomastia in California or on the West Coast in general, which is Dr. Cruz. He does a lot of gynecomastia surgeries. I looked through dozens of examples of his surgeries, and I realized that he had what was necessary, which is this. He would remove the gland completely. He wouldn't leave a little bit of the gland. I made that clear to him because I told him I use steroids and I don't want to have to worry about it growing ever again. And he did that properly. They never grew it again. He removed the gland completely without making like a concave shape in the tissue. But the other thing is you have to be very artistic to be good at this surgery. Because, for example, sometimes the skin on one breast or the breast tissue on one side is bigger than the other side. So to make them symmetrical, they may have to remove a bit of skin. So where they make the incision, how much skin they remove, all of this is artistic talent. Cruz, I saw many of examples. They were all wonderful. Now, I should mention something. I have heard once recently, in the last few weeks, that somebody had a bad experience with Dr. Cruz. I admit this. I heard this. I don't know if it's true. I cannot physically imagine Dr. Cruz doing a bad job. I've never heard it before that incident, and I never heard it afterwards. I can't imagine it myself, so I would personally go to Dr. Cruz, and I wouldn't go to anybody else. I even looked, by the way, at surgeons when I was in England, and I didn't find any good surgeons there at all. I don't know if there are, but I didn't find any that were very talented in gynecomastia surgery. But Cruz is very trustworthy. Personally, if I had to do it over again, I would go back to him again. Oh, genuinely. He's really fantastic. They're very professional. He's very artistic. The job was very well done. It was freeing, honestly, especially at that time. I used to use steroids. It was so freeing. I could do whatever I wanted. I didn't have to use an AI. And as I said, the glandular tissue was completely removed. It never regrew. I never used an AI. And I used my highest test dosages after that as an experiment. And I never had any issues. So it went really well. By the way, I've spoken to him recently because I wanted to see if he could give you guys a discount. I didn't get a discount, but I got him to waive the consultation fee. If you mention Leo and Longevity, he'll waive the consultation fee. That's all that I could get. But they do have some, I think they have some kind of plans, of payment plans and stuff like that. Anyway, guys, my point in making this video was this. Don't keep taking a SERM like raloxifene or tamoxifen thinking you're going to like cause complete attrition of the breast tissue. Trust me. I took tamoxifen for 2 years straight. It doesn't go away. It atrophies, and then once you stop using it, once the estrogen signaling happens again, it grows all over again, and it doesn't completely atrophy. So, and you're going to damage your eyes. Most likely damage your eyes in some way, even if you don't notice it immediately, but a lot of people notice it. On the other hand, if you crush your estrogen, you're going to seriously predispose yourself to cardiovascular disease and many other diseases. So really, my opinion, I often tell people that message me or ask me about this on private messages, I tell them, in my opinion, stop using steroids and go get the surgery. And if you can't afford the surgery, don't take steroids until you can afford the surgery. Genuinely, because it's just managing that estrogen level or using a SERM, because you can't manage the estrogen level. So you're going to have to crush it. or use a high dose SERM. And if you use the SERM continuously, you're eventually going to damage your eyes, whether you notice it in the short term or not. Anyway guys, I hope this was a little bit helpful for you younger guys that don't have as much experience with gynecomastia. You will not be able to get rid of it chemically. You can make it atrophy. It will regrow later, potently. And the only way really to get rid of it is with a surgery. And the surgery genuinely is the most freeing and wonderful experience, as long as you don't have somebody who butchers you, which means one side is different than the other, especially if you have a stretched skin or something like that. And as long as they genuinely remove the breast tissue. Now, you have to tell the doctor this, because I have subscribers right now who've had gynecomastia surgery that didn't remove the full gland and it regrew. So you just have to make sure that you talk to the doctor, whoever he is. Tell him, I take steroids. If it regrows, I'm coming to your house. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for bearing with me. I'll see you next time.